As coverage of the coronavirus has escalated, the 2020 presidential campaign has become an afterthought. That might be good news for Joe Biden, the likely Democratic nominee, who's largely dodged media scrutiny after a troubling allegation of sexual assault. Adam has more.
Joe Biden is known to be touchy-feely, but sometimes he takes it too far.
Out of nowhere, I feel Joe Biden put his hands on my shoulders.
When former Nevada Assemblywoman Lucy Flores accused Biden of inappropriate physical contact last year, it made headlines and then faded away. But now a former Biden staffer is accusing him of something much worse.
He had me against the wall, and then his hands were down my skirt and up my skirt, and I wasn't wearing tights or anything.
Tara Reid says Biden sexually assaulted her when she worked for him in 1993. She's made the claim in that interview with the Hill TV show Rising, an article in The Intercept, and on the Katie Halper show.
Some people will say it didn't happen and they don't believe me, and I don't care. The people that need to hear it will.
So far, though, that doesn't include the mainstream media.
How quickly, in that matter, can you reassemble the pandemic team?
Maybe that's because right now it's hard for anyone to think about anything other than the coronavirus crisis. But Salon's Amanda Marcotte has another explanation, saying Reid's account has some red flags, including the fact that she once accused Biden of lesser offenses. But some say, so what?
If you scrutinize anyone's life and you want to dismiss their claims, you can always find those red flags.
It's just like with Bill Clinton.
And if the media really believes that Me Too claims should be taken seriously, it's hard to see why Biden hasn't been asked directly about Reid's accusation.
All right, joining me again are Adam Reilly and Dan Lothian. Adam, do you think there's a reason beyond the coronavirus, overwhelming story that this has not been scrutinized more?
I think one possibility, which we didn't mention in the piece, is that people have become inured to these allegations when it comes to political figures. There are so many claims involving President Trump, and attention was paid to them, and then it seemed like it sort of didn't really matter. So I think that may be part of it. We mentioned the red flags about Tara Reid. She is an unusual character. She wrote these public posts on the website Medium expressing a bizarre fondness for and admiration for Vladimir Putin a few years ago. I want to note that Salon did get a statement from the Biden campaign, which said the claims are false and that women have a right to tell their stories and that media outlets need to vet those stories. But a key part of vetting them is asking the accused, what's your response to this?
Yeah, Dan, I remember several years ago back in the John Edwards scandal, when the National Enquirers first broke that story about a love child, nobody touched that. It was almost 9 months or 7 or 8 months before the mainstream media picked it up, and then sure enough, it was true. So do you think in some respects they're loath to go after this now?
I think so, perhaps. Not necessarily because of that case, but because it requires a lot of manpower to be able to dig around and figure out, get as close as you can to the truth. In fact, there have been those red flags in her story, but she seems generally very credible. Nonetheless, it does require a lot of digging. You have to put people, whether it's producers or reporters out there in the field working the phones. And given the current climate, as you know, Emily, anytime there's a major story, whether it's something like this or something lesser, big hurricanes that we've seen, it's usually all hands on deck. So you have people who work in the back rooms doing research work, they're pulled into action, or you have people who even work on the assignment desk who help guide reporters, to their stories. They're moved out into the field or moved into areas of more editorial in nature, and so having to do with the big story of the day. So I do think that this is more, it is a difficult story to pursue, but I think that it's more along the lines of everyone is consumed with this story, rightly so. And what's doubly hard in a story like this, it's not just you're out trying to dig for this story, but you're trying to survive at the same time, right? So it makes it extra difficult for news organizations to pursue a story like this.
And one of the things that gives her credibility were some of the specifics. She remembered exactly where she was in the Russell building. She remembers almost everything about the conversation except how it started. She remembered she was bringing him something. Some of the details she said she wasn't wearing underwear. I don't know any woman in the world who would do that wearing a skirt. But so it's almost like, the specifics add credibility, but then that detail, I have to say, threw me. Sorry.
Well, I didn't catch that one at all. That went right over my head.
Oh, okay.
When I listened to the podcast interview that she did with Katie Halper, I found her tone and her recollections to strike me as credible. But it is worth highlighting. She had this different account that she provided to a local newspaper reporter about a year ago, in which she said Biden touched her shoulders and then ran his finger up her neck, apparently on multiple occasions. Now, her explanation for why her account has changed is she really wanted to forget this thing she claims Biden did to her. I don't know what is true and isn't true here, but it does seem like there is enough there to warrant more coverage than it's gotten.
And she did report it at the time. She told her mother, Dan, and she told other people. So it's not like this is just coming out of the blue. She told friends, she told family.
Right, and I think what makes it different this time is that there are more details that weren't reported initially. On that hand, though, she has she sort of explained, and I watched the interview that she did. She does explain why she didn't lay out some of the details at the time, so it all seems to make sense. But there are those little gaps. I mean, she does have a clear memory of what happened during that incident. But, there are some pieces of it that she doesn't recall. Like, I don't remember what I said at the time, or I don't know exactly what he said to me, but I remember just after that what he said. Not unusual if you're in a traumatic event.
You're traumatized.
Exactly. She's credible, but there are those little bits and pieces, not to say that it's not true, but it takes a lot of work to try to get at the bottom and get to the heart of that.
And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw this week that more mainstream media looked at it and asked him about it. It's a hard time in the middle of everything else to go up to the presumptive nominee and start asking about this stuff. But I would suspect it would come up. Would you agree?
I feel like it has to. At a certain point, it's been percolating for so long, mostly in outlets which, it's worth noting, are very sympathetic to Bernie Sanders. But that has no bearing on whether the claim itself has merit.